Coming up next on Beyond.
I have photographed carnage left by the death squads in Latin America. The remains of thousands of dead left in shallow waters of the killing fields. I have felt the tormented spirits of the murdered, clamoring to be heard. But this painting brings me peace and a feeling of warmth and companionship that I have never felt before.
Haunted objects from beyond.
The notion that an object can be haunted or may possess supernatural powers has been with mankind since our earliest beginnings. Like many things, the belief has become more complex or sophisticated with time, but the essence remains the same. Objects, it seems, can possess attributes of those who once owned them, such as religious relics. Sometimes these objects may be the body part of a saint, or something used or worn by a holy person or a king. The Ark of the Covenant, the Spear of Destiny, the Holy Grail, and Shroud of Turin, to name but a few. Some objects are protected from theft or vandalism with curses, like the treasure of the mummified remains of Tutankhamun. Some objects bring good fortune or specific powers, such as talismans, rings, wampum bags, and eagle feathers. Some objects are simply haunted. On the face of it, it's easy to dismiss such items as being hoaxes or frauds driven by the promise of profit or other earthly motivations. Some objects, for example, seem to exist merely to support religious dogma or to keep treasure safe. Certainly these are the objects that inspire the imagination. Evil-looking dolls, skulls, lifelike portraits with sinister eyes that seem to follow you. But things get really interesting when evidence seems to verify supernatural powers that are attributed to an object. It is this fascinating and controversial world of what we are loosely calling haunted objects, which we will investigate in this episode. A subject so curious that it tempts us to peer into the darkest shadows of that murky landscape in an effort to catch a glimpse of what it is that influences us from the world beyond. The notion of haunted objects, or objects such as rings or swords that carried some kind of spirit of an earlier owner, went hand in hand with the concepts of early formalized religion. Cases such as the Hope Diamond, the Spear of Destiny, and Tutankhamun's tomb are well documented and well publicized, but also it is known that these cases are exaggerated by tabloid-styled reporting. Therefore, it may be better for us to examine less famous cases that have not been tainted by sensationalism.
Did that particular glass mean anything to me? Prior? No. The dentist wanted to do a root canal, and I didn't want that, so I decided that I could gargle with salt water, and it would help. And I would warm a bit of water, rather than have it cold, and put it in a glass that had about a half a teaspoon of salt in it. And just put in about an inch of water, enough for a gargle. And on One particular night, I heated the water, and I thought it was just heated for a few seconds, but apparently I wasn't counting correctly. And when I put it into the glass that had the bit of salt in the bottom, the glass suddenly made a popping sound, and the glass spread apart about 7 or 8 inches. And it was funny because the glass stayed standing up. Usually when you pour hot water into something, the ring of the bottom will split out. But in this case, the glass split top to bottom. So I shoved the glass to the side and cleaned up the water and went to bed. And forgot about the glass standing both halves over at the side. And the next thing I knew, it was 10 in the morning, and I had slept through the whole night. No more getting up 3 times to gargle the salt water. And I looked in the mirror, and the swelling was gone from my face. So then I was all delighted about that and came out to the kitchen, and my glass was repaired. It did resemble a glue job that perhaps a kindergarten kid would have done with white glue, but really, it's salt. And the glass was, again, a glass, and still is. Probably not too good to use anymore, but it is interesting.
That looks like a crystalline formation.
Right, yeah. Yes,
So-
it is spreading out into salt crystals. Well, my partner passed away last fall, a few months earlier, and I hadn't, at the time, I didn't connect anything with it. Salt is biblically used for healing, and I was still in some ways needing emotional healing at the time. Actually, when the night before my partner passed, he said that he was going to give me a message. With the sense of humor that he has, I can see that he would have, done a silly thing like mending a glass. I really have no explanation.
From Huna, and this is an ancient Hawaiian tradition, their belief is that every time you touch something, you give it a bit of energy of yours. And so there again, they say that again, anytime you touch things, or if you've had something around you a lot, it's going to pick up your signature, shall we say.
It's called quantum mechanical entanglement. So you have got 2 particles which are entangled with one another. So there is a quantum mechanical property called a spin. So one of the particle has a spin up and the other has a spin down. But when you and I look at this particle, we say, it's up. Then we know that the particle there is down. And the spooky part is, how do these 2 particles know? How this particle in Timbuktu know that this particle, which became up only when we looked at it, wasn't up before. So how the particle in Timbuktu knew that this particle has been seen in the upper state by the observers here, and therefore I better be down in the down state. That's the spooky part.
The traditional tribes from Australia, where they are actually able to go and to follow somebody for days and know that someone has been there. And they actually enter like this dreaming space, and they can feel the energy. Or they'll say to someone, well, so-and-so was just here a while ago and they left this signature, they left this message. So this is like days later, they'll be able to describe what happened, describe what was going on. So to me that shows evidence that in different types of cultures, they do recognize this.
Arts, literature, everything else. And they are all coming together. This is the beauty of the 21st century science, that everything that we know, it doesn't matter whether it is science or whatever, everything that we know, they're all coming together. Science is no longer something which is done by a few crazy people in their corner of the lab. It has impact on everything. And if you promise to cut this thing out of your tape, it has impact on religion.
A Harris poll in 2003 determined that 51% of the adult American population believed in ghosts. Early studies by the University of Chicago determined that 42% of the adult population have experienced some form of apparition. The first occurrence of such belief was probably when cave dwellers threw spears at cave paintings of animals they intended to hunt in the coming days or weeks. Psychic attributes were attached to both the paintings and the spears. This developed into shamanic ceremonies, which are still practices today with pipes, drums, totem poles, and animal parts, such as eagle feathers and bear claws. The objects supposedly having the power of the donor. An eagle feather, for example, is thought to be able to improve perceptions, understanding, and sight. Early civilizations developed these beliefs into formalized religions and eventually paintings, objects, scriptures, and even certain words and numbers were imbued with supernatural powers.
You get into traditional religion and you think very much sacred objects or sacred spaces. People have gathered and meditated or prayed, and it's collected an energy, it's collected a signature. So in the same way, people's objects can collect a signature. I mean, we do it sort of naturally. I mean, mom passes down a ring or grandma passes down a ring and it becomes sentimental and we think of grandma. Well, maybe there's more going on than just thinking of grandma.
The fad for relic hunting started in antiquity and has been through numerous eras of popularity, whether it be when ancient Rome sought mementos from lost legions, knights of the Crusades seeking out the Holy Grail, Egyptologists dealing with curses in pharaohs' tombs, or Nazis seeking out of the Ark of the Covenant. There are anonymous collectors today who would spend millions on the opportunity of acquiring objects that may give them supernatural powers, or even perhaps immortality. There are two such collectors known to the Beyond team. One such person in France, simply known as the Collector, who is reputed to have lived for hundreds of years, and the other in England, who acquired his wealth from a successful career as a performer. To the general public, probably the most famous of recent examples can be seen on internet auctions, such as those of haunted paintings, walking sticks, and jewelry sold on eBay, winning as much as $65,000 for one supposed haunted object. In this case, it was purchased as a cheap way of gaining some publicity for a casino.
So a house is an object, isn't it?
Of course it is. Of course it is. And ground is an object. And if you have a certain event happen around a space in the earth, it's going to carry that energetic signature.
And there's our notorious cupboard. Now, this is the first time I've opened it since the first or second week in January, so about to have a look and see what the heck is happening in here now. Okay, this is the cupboard where we have seen 3 different pictures by 3 different people in here, and there's the little toy that I brought back from Calgary, and it's exactly where I had first put it, but the picture is different. Now, this is for the third time, the fourth time actually, this picture is different. In the last picture, the one that Jan and Gwen and Amy saw, they were sitting side by side. They were not embracing at all. The one Janice and myself saw was a blank piece of paper, and the first was a picture about that size, maybe a little bit bigger, and it was of a boy with a red hoodie and the hoodie on his head. So this is the fourth different picture.
The picture that's in there now is smaller than the one that we saw, and the boy and girl were further back in the picture than they are now, and they weren't, like, she's kissing the boy on the cheek in this picture, and they were sitting side by side in the picture we saw originally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like both facing the camera.
Yeah.
There's two complete horses, pictures of horses, brown horses. Only one of them has eyes. There's three complete pictures of birds, all with different colors on them. There's one traced bird with pencil that's not colored in yet, and it's only 3/4 complete with pencil. There's a thick pencil letter of an O or a D, but it looks more like a D because it's curved a little. So there's a letter of an R and a letter of a D. The three pictures of the complete birds, the most colorful one in the middle, it's blue and red with a yellow beak. It's got claws sticking out of it, brown claws coming from underneath it, and it's actually grabbing in the very bottom of this picture. It looks like a little boy. That's the bird, and that's the boy, and its claws are grabbing the boy by the arm. Like the boy actually has a smile on his face the closer I get. There's the horse with no eyes. Here's the horse with an eye. An O or a D, but it looks more like a D. It's curved a little.
Well, when we came up to look, when we came to investigate,
Yeah.
we
Three
came
birds.
in here and we never saw any
No.
drawings there. The only thing that was there was the cardboard.
Two horses and three birds.
Did not see that before, Tony, honestly.
So those drawings have evolved since that time.
Since November, since you were here.
And Amy definitely would have seen those if she was in there.
I don't remember seeing pictures. I just remember the cardboard for insulation, but I never saw any drawings on there. And those brick, like the toys, there's only a yellow brick and that long white brick.
Yeah.
There was a red brick in there before when we were here. Yeah. There's no red brick now.
And this closet hasn't, she says nobody's been into this closet since.
No.
I'm a photographer worldwide. Wherever there's a crisis, I'm not far from it, camera in hand. I bought the painting in an auction as part of a box lot of odds and ends that contained an old vintage camera that I was hoping to acquire. I was delighted when I saw the painting and realized I'd won 2 prizes for such a small sum. From the first night that I hung the painting, the problems began. I took the painting down, and the problems increased and became very violent and noisy. Eventually I called in a psychic who informed me that the spirit of the last owner had somehow became entangled with the painting, and that in fact the spirit was not at all unhappy, but was insecure and wanted the painting to be hung, and never for me to sell it because it was happy to be here. I promised the painting that I would never willingly sell or dispose of it, and from that time, there hasn't been a single problem. I have photographed carnage left by the death squads in Latin America, the remains of thousands of dead left in shallow waters of the killing fields. I have felt the tormented spirits of the murdered, clamoring to be heard. But this painting brings me peace and a feeling of warmth and companionship that I have never felt before.
Next time on Beyond. Thought from beyond. In this third season of Beyond, we will examine some of the major mysteries of the paranormal, some of which have woven themselves into the fabric of our culture. Many are interconnected with other subjects in this and other seasons of Beyond. Sometimes research leads to answers. Sometimes answers from science, sometimes from spiritual realms, and sometimes from somewhere in between. Mysteries that inspire the imagination and compel us to seek an answer. Mysteries such as supernatural predators, super psychic children, body memories, sexual demons, pyramids, haunted objects, strange creatures, cattle mutilations, voices channeled from beyond, and even thought itself.
Although it is very hard to prove the existence of haunted objects, it would seem that there is enough anecdotal evidence to make the case. Evidence that originates in just about every era of human history. Whereas there certainly seems to be enough personal assertions, there has been very little scientific research in this area of the paranormal. Even when objects have been investigated under controlled circumstances, like with the Turin Shroud, it would seem that it is impossible for scientists to agree on even the data they have gathered. As humanity has turned away from religious dogma and developed more personal, self-asserted beliefs, it would seem, however, that we have not lost the need to believe in the paranormal. In fact, it has been noted that the more technological developments in society, the greater interest develops in the supernatural. The more we are able to learn, the more we need to know. Perhaps objects that we can touch and hold represent for us the possibility of concrete evidence of the paranormal. Yet paradoxically, the more concrete the reality, the less able we seem to be able to technically define or explain paranormal realities. Even with all the tools at our disposal, we are still unable to climb the wall that divides us from the great beyond.